Edward Bleeker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the board. After review of the supplemental instructional materials available on the TEA website, I am forced to the conclusion that they all commit the following errors in various places in various ways. They fail to examine all sides of the scientific evidence of scientific explanations as required by TEACS 3A. They all fail to significantly address many of the new biology TEACS or additions to the previous TEACS. They fail to bring the textbooks reasonably up to date with new research results, even where it contradicts the old textbook teachings. The absence of those corrections are factual errors. They continue to use the decades-old icons of evolution type illustrations. They're full of factual errors. For examples, the Miller-Urey experiment does not generate the required amino acids. Haeckel's embryos, the earlier stages than is typically shown, are actually divergent. They're more different as you go back than whereas the insinuation is that they're more similar, and that's just a factual error. The peppered moths, there's all kinds of talk, but they never mention the fact that there was no new species generated. Simply no new species. That's not a good illustration of evolution. Vestigial organs also. I've attached to my testimony 12 pages of 5 examples of discussions of things that can be used from new research to replace these icons of evolution type factual errors. Replace it with new research that teaches students things that should be there. If they're not there, they're missing factual errors that correct the old stuff.
All right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayo, thank you very much for your testimony. Board members, do we have questions? Mr. Mercer.
Mr. Mayo, thank you for being here today. So my actually ties on to with the first comparative anatomy, which Darwin had, but you're talking about amino acids to become proteins, to become the cell. You're saying that comparative anatomy and comparative, if you will, biochemistry, do they complement one another?
Well, a lot of the new research where they're able to, in the last 10 years, start efficiently sequencing these proteins and DNA, when they look at that and hope that it will confirm the fossil record, they find that it does not. In fact, one series of one protein look at in all kinds of different animals will suggest one kind of relationship, another protein will suggest another kind of relationship, and neither one of them confirm the fossil record. Another line of research associated with that is Dr. Gene Hunt, I believe it was. Yes. He analyzed the fossil record and the actual fossils that are there in a very large-scale statistical study. What he found that the directional change, which you normally think about in evolution, represents only 5% of the fossil record, whereas the stasis, the long strings of unchanging, represent 45% of the fossil record. It's very different from what we are typically illustrated in these books.
Another question, Mr. Mercer.
Would it be a factual error to say that the comparative anatomy always agrees with comparative biochemistry in support of
Yes,
evolution?
it would be false to say that.
Thank you.
It would be a factual error. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Leo.
Mr. Merrill, would you consider Haeckel's embryos to be an error, or would you consider it fraudulent?
I think it's a long...
Is this germane to our talk about instructional materials?
Yes, because we are dealing with 3 instructional materials that include Haeckel's embryos, and I think there's consensus in the community that that's either error or fraudulent.
Okay, if you'll make your question short, and there, I believe there are 2 publishers
It's a yes
left,
or no.
So
I would
short.
put it this way. Haeckel's embryos were generated over 100 years ago. Approximately every 20 years since then, there have been papers in the professional peer-reviewed journals telling about the problems with what Heckle presented, and it doesn't really represent what he claimed it did. And yet those things are still there, presented in pretty much that same way, that using modern photographs, but they're telling the same story. And to tell that same story, I think, knowing that it's wrong, is fraudulent.